talking to China, but their factories are closing all over China.
Is the administration talking to Beijing specifically about tariffs or not?
China's doing very poorly right now.
They are saying you guys are not talking about it. So is that true?
They have a different form of government they're playing.
Is that true?
They're getting absolutely hammered in
You
China.
didn't know if President Trump had spoken to Xi Jinping? Do you know now?
We're not going to talk about who's talking to whom.
Things are heating up in the trade war. It's not about tariffs anymore. It's about who's winning, who's losing, and who's trying to cover their tracks. Here's the latest take on this messy situation. No one seems to have it figured out yet, but everyone's got something to say.
While Trump rants about tariffs and short-term wins, China is quietly redrawing the world's economy long-term. New trade routes, new alliances, new manufacturing hubs that don't rely on America. While U.S. tariffs pile up, China's building a future that Trump's tariffs can't touch. China's playing a new trading game. Instead of fighting back, China's expanding deals with Brazil, Japan, South Korea, what used to be American territory, as well as ASEAN and the Middle East. It's cutting new pipelines, shipping routes, and supply chains, building connections, not walls. And overall, there's a global pivot. Major companies, European, Asian, American, are hedging their bets, diversifying out of U.S. markets, investing where trade wars aren't. The world isn't choosing China because it loves China. It's choosing China because it's predictable, stable, and focused on growth, not tantrums. Trump promised to bring manufacturing back to the U.S., but U.S. companies are either moving to Mexico or moving deeper into China's orbit. Apple, Tesla, Boeing, building more abroad than at home. China isn't losing production. It's gaining control over the supply chains that America depends on. And the dollar, America's real power, still strong for now, but China's pushing harder than ever for a yuan-based oil trades, digital currency, and regional lending outside the IMF system, outside of the dollar.
Meanwhile, the U.S. economy is starting to strain. Ports are empty, exports are down, and manufacturing shifts are happening faster than the headlines can keep up. But don't take our word for it. Just listen to what the insiders are whispering.
In 2 weeks' time, Carter, we'll see a drop on our import side of the business by about a third. And it could be as much as 40% the week to follow. Most American importers are saying that they're stopping shipments out of China because they simply weren't going to pay 2.5 times the cost of the goods. With information coming out of Washington seemingly by the hour, it's tough to get a line of sight on what's next. Inventory on hand right now in the United States will last for about 6 to 8 weeks. After that, shelves will be bare. We won't be able to buy as much online.
At this point, even if the tariffs are reduced significantly,
it'll still take about 10 days to 2 weeks to get these ships back in line over in China. Then it's a 2-week trip here to LA. So we're starting to cut it pretty close with respect to inventory in the US.
So we might see some empty shelves even if the tariffs are brought down in the next couple of weeks.
We're running out of time on that. And if we have fewer items to select from, that's going to put a pinch on the American buyer.
Everyone's pointing fingers, but China? They've already moved on. Buying beef from Australia, oil from Canada, and ditching Boeing for Airbus. So much for Made in the USA. The world's moving without the US, and here's the kicker. No one's talking about it.
China is no longer buying American beef. They're buying beef from Australia. China is no longer buying oil from the United States. They're now buying oil from Canada. China is no longer buying American soybeans. They're now buying soybeans from Brazil. China is no longer buying Boeing airplanes. Xiamen Airlines actually just refused to accept a Boeing airplane that had just arrived in China. They're now instead buying Airbuses from France, or they're expanding Comac, the Chinese indigenous homegrown domestic airplane brand, which they just signed a deal to sell several Comacs to Malaysia. China can basically buy everything that America sells, except for semiconductors, from other countries. The United States can only buy antibiotics, refined rare earth, iPhones, computers from China.
So, while the US drowns in its own trade wars, China's quietly replacing its old trade partners with new ones. The real question? Are we just watching the beginning of the end for the US as the global economic powerhouse? Because this isn't just a trade war, it's a changing of the guard. While China is serving patience and strategy, the U.S. has something to say.
Know that China is doing very poorly right now. I just saw some reports coming out, and I don't want that to happen to China. But at a certain point, I hope we're going to make a deal with China. We're talking to China, but their factories are closing all over China because we're not taking their product. We don't want their product unless they're going to be fair with us. Somebody said, well, were you happy? I said, I am not happy. I want China to do well. I want every country to do well. But they have to treat us fairly.
Fair, huh? As Trump pushes for deals, China's already well ahead, securing future partnerships while the U.S. argues over past mistakes. You can call it strategic, some are calling it a slow burn, but others are starting to say the U.S. is already outmatched.
Ну, знаете, я вам хочу что сказать. Соединенные Штаты опоздали лет на 15. Они не смогут остановить развитие Китая. Это невозможно сделать, так же, как вот невозможно сказать Солнцу, не вставай, оно все равно поднимется. Но есть объективные процессы экономического развития. Они связаны с миллионом факторов. И вот эта попытка сдержать развитие Китая, она негативно отражается и на экономике самих Соединенных Штатов. Они делают производство ряда своих товаров низкоконкурентоспособными. А если дальше пойдут по этому пути, сделают вообще неконкурентоспособными в отдельной отрасли экономики. Так сложилась кооперация на протяжении предыдущих десятилетий между экономикой Китая и Соединенными Штатами. Она взаимосвязана. Все это понимают. Но вот те действия, которые мы наблюдаем сегодня со стороны Штатов, мне кажется, что они имеют контрпродуктивный характер.
And this is what the world is whispering. China's rise is inevitable, and the more the U.S. tries to play catch-up, the further it falls behind. Are we watching the last breaths of U.S. economic dominance? More and more people are increasingly growing restless.
There are no more ships coming from China. Reports from Seattle, Oakland, Long Beach saying their ports are becoming empty. Very, very, very few goods are still arriving from China now, which means the trade war that Trump has enacted and the tariff plan is going to start working its way into our wallets. We're going to see a lot more empty shelves. There are going to be a lot more pricing on goods because we, as the biggest consumer against the biggest producer, will no longer be able to hold the supply that we want. Therefore, yeah, we're going to start seeing the trade war actually happen. Regardless, Trump has started a war with the biggest producer in the world as the biggest consumer in the world, so this will affect every single person living in America.
There's a big difference between American consumption, because people say, well, you know, the economy is bad, so China consumption will be good low. No, totally different. You Americans love to spend tomorrow's money and the other people's money maybe. We Chinese love to save money. We are probably the largest country, the safe deposit in the whole world. We've been poor for so many years. When we make money, we put in the banks because someday we know the disaster is coming, so we can spend the money.
What happens now? We are an enemy to China, and we are no longer friends with Canada. I live at the port of LA, and it's true. Everything's empty. The ships are not coming in. If anything, the ships that are out there right now, they've all stopped. Do you know how much dock workers make? They aren't getting jobs anymore. They are losing their jobs. These are the best jobs. These were the most secure jobs you could have in this area, and they are dying. And when the goods aren't coming in and the dock workers aren't working, then all the businesses around us and beyond are going to be affected. It's very upsetting when you do everything right, everything you're supposed to do, and yet we're still suffering. And it's not our faults. It's not our faults. It's the people up top. It's the government. It's the billionaires. It's the rich.
The U.S. imports 2 to 3 times more from China than vice versa, mostly everyday goods, the kind where price hikes directly affect average consumers. But China imports primarily high-end products, like luxury cars, advanced chips, designer goods, affecting mainly the wealthy. So why does the U.S. rely on China for daily essentials? Simply because there are not enough U.S. factories that make what's needed. So could someone build a U.S. factory to replace Chinese imports? Sure, if they've got millions or even billions of dollars to burn and years to waste. But with Trump's erratic policies where today's role could be overturned by a tweet tomorrow, would anyone risk huge capital on such uncertainty? Not to mention, a new president in 4 years could scrap everything.